Hello, all. This is part two of Maria Zakharova's speech on April 19, 2018. This is Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs. She made a long speech, part of which was about political crimes committed by the UK. So I'm reading it to you in parts. I broke it into a few parts because it is very long. So this is part two. Um, Here it goes. In the late 1960s and 1970s, the British authorities evicted 1,500 indigenous people from the Chagas Archipelago in the Indian Ocean. At the United Nations, the British diplomats passed off the indigenous Iloa people as contract workers. The reason was the US wished to set up a military base on one of these islands. It was that simple. Moreover, the whole archipelago was declared to be a marine reserve. In 1909, WikiLeaks reported that the British government had backed the project to make sure that the continued attempts of deported islanders to return to their home island would fail. Ironically, the American military base on Diego Garcia Island was called Camp Justice. Sounds great. Here's another example from recent history. The Secret Service of the British Armed Forces internationally falsified reports on military crimes committed between 2010 and 2013 so as to conceal information on killings of civilians in Afghanistan. Unarmed Afghan civilians who were regarded as potential Taliban militants were killed, not detained as per the report, during raids on their homes. Launched in 2014, the investigation into war crimes in Afghanistan committed in 2010-2013 was codenamed Operation Northmoor, with investigations establishing that the Secret Service in question had forged documents to shift the blame for killing unarmed civilians to the Afghan army. Uh, this is apropos international reputation, Mr. British Ambassador. The investigators got hold of drone footage, the so-called Kill TV, which clearly shows that it was the British rather than their Afghan colleagues who were firing at unarmed Afghans. According to the Times, July 2nd, 2017, the UK Defence Ministry intended to conceal these war crimes from the media because it believed that the publication of the investigation's details could cause damage to national security, public confidence, and collaboration with the Allies. At the same time, the UK top army brass described the evidence of mass killings that had been discovered during the investigation as reliable, very serious, and disastrous for the government. But no disaster ensued. The British authorities always have something to distract the attention of esteemed journalists. On November 19, 2017, the Sunday Times published another story of SAS killings, specifically an admission by Mayor Chris Green, who testified to a SAS unit killing in, in cold blood 3 peaceful Afghans in the courtyard of their homes at the village of Rahim, Narasarai, Helmand province. The civilians had no connections with the Taliban. Now to Iraq. According to information from open sources, 326 criminal proceedings were instituted in connection with British military abuses during the Iraq War in 2003 2011, with charges brought against 1,500 persons and the compensations paid to the injured parties adding up to £20 million. It could be said that these are just isolated occurrences unrelated to the official state strategy. After all, there's always an investigation following any wrongdoing. Well, there are investigations, of course, and people get punished, but the British government, which sanctions all these things, never suffers any punishment. And that is most important. All of this keeps happening again and again, year after year, decade after decade, century after century. The media focuses on an episode that happened in Basra in 2003 when the British military detained two Iraqis for an alleged killing of two British snipers. They were kept in prison without charge or trial for several years. They were charged with murder only in 2006, but Iraq's Supreme Tribunal dropped the charges as unsubstantiated. To minimize the murder, I'm sorry, to minimize the number of lawsuits against the British military for crimes committed during military campaigns, the Tory annual conference in uh, Birmingham, held in October 2016, was presented uh, with a government plan to grant British servicemen involved in conflicts abroad immunity from prosecution by the European Convention on Human Rights. Now let's move on to the to espionage operations and pinpoint sabotage and subversive acts. From time immemorial, representatives of Great Britain have been avid fans of various kinds of covert operations and targeted subversive acts against specific individuals as a way to secure political benefits for Great Britain. This predisposition is richly represented in their art, things like the James Bond Gold Collection. This may sound ridiculous unless you know that the author of the series, Ivan Fleming, had searched through the archives, so Agent 007 in fact has real prototypes. This anthology of crime, artfully described by writer and part-time naval intelligence officer Fleming, is a light version for those who are not interested in historiography, who see archive work as boring, or believe that materials there may have various interpretations and require additional checks. Indeed, the Bondiana is a very symptomatic example of the British government's love for such things. Fleming died in 1964, but what he described lives and thrives. New James Bond episodes are regularly released, as everyone is used to this scenario, to the superhero. Times change, the actors and sets change, but the idea remains unchanged. A British agent in the service of the kingdom gets nothing less than license to kill. Once again, I repeat, this is not fictional invention, but a result of work with archival materials. What we see is the Bondiana is actually taking place under the cover of MI5 and MI6. Thanks to the films, people have a basic understanding of the license to kill concept. a term denoting the permission granted by the official government or state agency to a secret agent who serves this authority to uh, independently make a decision on the necessity and expediency of murder to achieve a certain goal. Once the mission is completed, the agent always returns to the base. We have seen that as well. It's a pity that in normal life, to which we will now return, things are not so beautiful and dignified. Fleming did something brilliant. He took facts and packaged them beautifully. What we see is a very beautiful picture. And now getting back to reality. The following historical episodes are not fiction, they are facts. Some of them are proven, whereas others are highly likely hypotheses put forward by historians. But the key is that while as far back as a month and a half ago, we did not use materials which are just hypotheses in official statements, with a helping hand from Theresa May, who introduced the highly likely phrase to level an accusation of a most grave crime. Why should we deny it to ourselves? Scotland Yard historians uh, also maintain the British authorities' complicity in the murder of Grigory Rasputin. Michael Smith, a historian of the British intelligence, writes in his book 6, A History of Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, that at height of World War I in 1916, the resident agent of the British intelligence in Petrograd heard rumors that Grigory Rasputin was trying to conclude a separate peace treaty with Germany through the Tsarina. This fact worried the British a great deal. Captain Oswald Raymer of MI6 was dispatched to Petrograd to get information about the talks from Rasputin and eliminate him if necessary. According to Michael Smith, the third security shot in Rasputin's head. The official murderer's testimony does not say anything about that. Came from a 455 Webley, a British revolver, whereas the plotter's memoirs indicate that Yusupov fired a pocket-sized Browning and Purishkevich a passage pistol. The following is a striking admission from the classified correspondence of British intelligence agents. A friend of Oswald Rayner's wrote a letter to a British intelligence officer, John Scale, on December 24, 1916. I quote, Although matters have not proceeded entirely to plan, our objective has been achieved. Rayner is attending to loose ends and will certainly contact you. End of quote. A number of historians are convinced that the message refers to Rasputin's murder. In 2004, the BBC aired its documentary, Who Killed Rasputin? According to British journalists, the glory and the plot of the murder belonged to Great Britain, whereas the Russian conspirators were just actors or the instruments. The actors or the instruments. By the way, there are similar versions regarding the murder of Russian Emperor Paul I, but I think this is a question to be addressed to historians. Historians also write about the so-called Lockhart conspiracy organized in 1918 by the heads of the diplomatic missions of Britain, France, and the USA to Soviet Russia in order to overthrow the Bolsheviks. The conspiracy involved the chief of the British Special Mission, Robert Lockhart, French Ambassador Joseph Newlands, and the US Ambassador David Francis. Robert Lockhart tried to bribe the Latvian riflemen who were guarding the Kremlin. You know the rest of the story. The Latvians were supposed to be sent to Vologda to join the British troops uh, who would be landed in Arkhangelsk so as to assist them in their advance. This is just a brief summary. You can read more on that. In 2013, information was made public indicating that the MI6 intelligence service was the mastermind of the assassination. Now we're moving to another continent of Patrice Lumumba, the first democratically elected prime minister of Congo. A Labour member of the House of Lords said that Baroness Daphne Park of Monmouth had confessed to him a few months prior to her death in March 2010 that she had been behind the 1961 assassination of Patrice Lumumba because she feared that the new democracy would forge an alliance with the Soviet Union. In a letter to the London Review of Books, Lord Lee reported that Daphne Park made her confession as they were having a cup of tea. From 1959 to 1961, she was the consul and first secretary in Leopoldville, the capital of the Belgian Congo, which was renamed Kinshasa after the country's gained independence. Lord Lee writes, I mentioned the uproar surrounding Lumumba's abduction and murder and recalled the theory that MI5 might have something to do with it. We did, she replied. I organized it. As time went by, official London and its diplomatic missions continued to actively meddle in the domestic affairs of other states and to influence their political regimes. Suffice it to recall 20th century events when British secret services took part in staging a coup d'etat in Iran in 1953. Since the early 20th century, British capital controlled the Iranian oil industry via a concession agreement that appropriated most of the country's oil revenues. This situation provoked social and political tensions in Iran, which became more pronounced by the late 1940s and early 1950s. In 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh was appointed Prime Minister of Iran and started implementing an independent foreign and domestic policy. His policies were mostly aimed at eliminating foreign monopolies operating in the country on highly unprofitable terms to the detriment of Iranian interests. A movement for the nationalization of Iranian oil fields became the main symbol of Mossadegh's independent policy. At that time, oil export revenues were allotted disproportionately in favor of the Anglo-Iranian oil company now called British Petroleum, with British government acting as its main shareholder. With the support of the Majlis Parliament, Mossadegh passed a law on the nationalization of the Iranian oil industry. This hit British interests hard. After all, official London launched a subversive operation against the Iranian government, imposed an international embargo on Iranian petroleum products, and thus caused a major economic crisis in Iran. British diplomats working in Moscow are probably listening and recording all this. They will have to send their report to London today. I have done my best, and this statement is 17 pages long. I have one question. Are you proud of your history? Then you need to make a choice. Either you advocate human rights, international law, and democracy, or you're proud of what you did in the past and continue to do today. In August 1953, the CIA and intelligence service staged their joint operation at Ajax to overthrow the government of Mossadegh. A new Iranian government uh, s- signed another agreement on establishing a consortium of US and British companies that obtained part of Iranian oil revenues and the right to develop oil fields in that country. I'm gonna stop for today. This was part 2. The final part 3 is coming up, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching and see you next time.